The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to another edition of the X Zone radio TV show, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. My guest tonight is Doug Elwell, theologian, researcher, and author of Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man, and The End of the Age. Doug brings a unique blend of biblical scholarship and astronomical investigation to the controversial and often misunderstood subject of Planet X. Now, is there a hidden celestial body lurking in our solar system? Could it be the same sign referenced in ancient scripture that heralds the end of this age? Now, Doug joins us to unravel the clues, connect ancient text to modern science, and offer his take on what might be one of the most significant prophetic warnings of our time. Buckle up, X-Zone Nation. We're heading into deep space, biblical prophecy, and the hidden history of Planet X. Joining me now is Doug Elwell. And Doug, welcome back to the X Zone. Doug, where did your interest in Planet X come from?
Well, when I was a younger man in college, I was kind of bombarded with evangelical theology as a Christian, still am. And they were always talking about the second coming. And so I was kind of curious about that. It sounded like kind of the ultimate puzzle. Figure out, is this really something to this? I was having a crisis of faith at the time. Do I want to continue on as a Christian or something else? Because it was kind of unpopular to be a Christian at the time. It still is. But I found that I actually read the Bible. I found it to be an absolutely fascinating document. As I got older, it became more interesting to me as more of the ultimate puzzle. And it seems to me the second coming was like, in the book of Revelation, was particularly fascinating. So it appealed to me not only from a faith aspect, but to a kind of a riddle, the ultimate riddle that needed to be solved. So I like solving puzzles and figuring out mysteries. Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons I started Mysterious World at mysteriousworld.com, is that I wanted to test out the waters of the internet to see, is the internet a good place to talk about Planet X? And so I started off with Mysterious World, which is a little more accessible and less controversial, if that's possible, than Planet X. And then once I'd finished up a few years doing Mysterious World, I started doing the Planet X material. And through this all, I was trying to figure out, what is the sign of Christ coming in the end of the age? And it says so in Matthew 24:30. That was particularly interesting to me. What is that sign? Is it a star? Is it a planet? Is it some kind of supernatural sign? And it occurred to me that was the same thing as the Star of Bethlehem also, because that was kind of a similar thing that preceded Christ's first coming. I thought probably, well, if he's going to be consistent, he'll have the same sign for a second coming. People use the same name. Why won't they use the same sign to indicate that their identity? So with that in mind, I started studying the Star of Bethlehem to see, what could this mean? What could this be? And could it be something that could be returned sometime in the future? And during that period, I actually looked at really all of the theories about what the planet, what the Star of Bethlehem could have been. Was it actually a star, a conjunction of planets, a comet? And those were actually the big three. They thought it was either a supernova, a conjunction of planets, or possibly a comet. It says in Matthew 2, and when the Magi traveled from the east, which I later found out was Persia, because the Magi were a caste of Persian astrology priests, who actually called the Magi. It was actually a tribe of people, part of the Medians, who were merged with the Persians to form the Medo-Persian Empire. And of the Medians, there was a special class of priests called the Magi, and those are the ones who came to visit Jesus at the manger. And it says that they followed the star as it moved before them, indicating that it was actually moving separate from the background stars. So it must have been an object inside of our solar system, which meant they could not be a supernova. conjunction of planets was possible, but conjunction of planets usually only last for a day or two, and then they kind of start moving apart fairly rapidly. They had to take a walk of at least a month or two to get there. Comet would work well, but it's a harbinger of disaster. And so, and comets come and go all the time. There's several major comets, several centigrade comets every century, and so there was nothing special about that. And so nothing really fit until when I was checking out the Southern Illinois University's library. They had a great library down there. When I was going there for undergrad studying cinema and photography, I came across this book called The 12th Planet by Zechariah Sitchin. And then I realized that must be it, because it was talking about a new planet in our solar system that entered in from the outside, which he believed the Sumerians had interpreted as one of their gods. And it was used, this god, this planet, actually created heaven and earth as we understand them today. So that was the basis of my journey of Planet X, the sign of the Son of, and the end of the age, to thoroughly explain and review, is this theory possible? Could it be a planet? And if so, how does it show up in the Bible? Does it work with astronomy? And also, how does it fit into the end time scenario? And I found it fit in perfectly and answered all the questions and many more I didn't even know I had.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Doug, can you briefly explain what Planet X is and why it's so popular these days here in the 21st century?
People love the unknown, and Planet X as the unknown
Hmm.
planet, literally, that's what they mean. The X meaning unknown, like in a
Yep.
mathematical equation. And people are always searching for something beyond to find the meaning and purpose. People don't feel like they're fulfilled by what they know now. We're getting better at understanding the world we live in, but there's always something new to explore. And Planet X has always been a mystery because there's all kinds of evidence for it, but we can't see it with our own eyes. People have theorized that it was seen by the IRAS astronomical telescope, which was infrared, um, back in the 1970s, possibly. And it was never reported because it was seen to be a threat to Earth that we need to plan to deal with sometime in the future. And so some have theorized that it was covered up on purpose because it was a potential threat to Earth, which I actually believe in also. And so it might be the last 50 years in preparation for Planet X's return, building up of weapons, the Space Force, so-called, and all these
Yep.
things could all be being built up to resist this planet and any sort of space fleet that might be coming with it.
How did your background in theology and archaeology shape your interpretation of these ancient manuscripts?
Well, theology and the archaeology, these are hard sciences, and so they teach you discipline and logic. And so it kept me from going off into flights of fancy. We saw a
Mhm.
lot of these folks out there in the fringe who write about Planet X and other things and study Sitchin. So I studied Sitchin, who is very much a fringe theorist, but I actually, even though most of his stuff was speculative, interesting but speculative, I read more like realistic fiction. The Planet X theory was actually granted a hard science fact. Planet X is actually a mainstream scientific theory. I didn't even know that. I hadn't even heard of it before I read it in Sitchin. I actually took a class in astronomy as an elective at college, and they definitely had a section on Planet X in there. So I was convinced that there was a legitimate theory, and there were articles available in the library, academic and otherwise, that talked about the search for Planet X had been going on since the 1930s. And the planet Pluto, or actually the former planet Pluto, was actually founded as a result of the search for Planet X. Since we had satellites going past Uranus and Neptune back in the 1980s, they actually imaged the planets Uranus and Neptune very precisely, and also got a lot of gravimetric data, the axial tilt rotation rate, very precise measurements. Before that, we could only estimate based on some very blurry images from telescopes. Even our best telescopes could only capture a very blurry image of them. This was extremely sharp and very detailed and give us precise dimensions and characteristics of both of these planets, and also somewhat of Pluto, which was much closer than it would have been otherwise. And Pluto was determined was actually not a planet; it was too small,
Hmm.
and its orbit took it in and out of our solar system, and that orbit intersected with the planet Neptune so closely that it, along with the fact that it was identical in size and characteristics with Pluto's other moon Triton, that it was made of the same stuff, nearly the same percentages in terms of gaseous what they were made up of, that they determined absolutely that there was an escaped satellite of Neptune, which had been liberated from Neptunian orbit by an object that roughly the size and mass of the theoretical planet X that had been searched for the entire time. And so the planet X theory, which was about to go away, suddenly just burst back into glory and say, well, this we weren't certain about it before, now we're sure, because only a planet-sized object could have done these things to Neptune and liberated Pluto in just such a way that it was undisrupted and is still intact and had an orbit that indicated that it had been pulled out of orbit of Neptune by an object that was coming into the solar system from the outside. It was a highly elliptical orbit which took it like this. And it was also at an angle to the ecliptic, indicating the object that dragged it out of Neptunian orbit must have come in from beneath the solar system's plane of the ecliptic and also from the outside. And it was such a harsh angle that it actually took Pluto into a very elliptical orbit, which takes it inside and outside of Neptune's orbit. And so, but it does intersect with Neptune regularly, indicating that it is in fact a former satellite. And so they determined absolutely that planet X must exist.
Mm-hmm.
It must have intersected with Neptune sometime in the past, and it's probably still out there. And they also believe it precessed over time so that its orbit becomes flatter and flatter and comes closer and closer to the sun, to the point where Sitchin's theory that Earth was actually, the proto-Earth actually intersected and conflicted with planet X sometime in our ancient past of our solar system, probably a long time before man was created. That's possible because there's evidence that all of the outer planets and some of the inner planets may have been interfered by one or more planet X-type objects, explaining why all of the planets except the inner planets, Mercury and Venus, have axial tilts, orbits, somewhat eccentric orbits. They all have moons and
Doug, I hate to do this. I've got to take my first commercial break. Please stand
Sure.
by. Explanation Doug Elwell. So guestplanet-x.info is the website. And this is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe, dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight around the world on Tuber, on, let me see, the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and of course, the X Zone Broadcast Network and X Zone TV channel. Here in St. Catharines, you can listen to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ, streaming us around the world on classic1220.ca. We'll be back after these short breaks. Don't go away. Welcome back, X-Zone Nation. Doug Elwell is my special guest this hour. We're talking about Planet X. And Doug, based on the research that you've done over the years on Planet X, when was the last time that there was actually a photo taken of Planet X in outer space?
There was never one taken.
Never.
The photos we have are basically the footprints it left behind when it destroyed the outer solar system. And so we can't, for example, the example I usually use is if you if you drive up to an intersection, you see a car totaled sitting on the opposite corner of you, and there's glass and a big fender in the middle of the street, which is the size of a truck fender. You can deduce that a truck drove through the intersection, smashed into the car, put it up on the opposite corner, and then drove through after it lost its fender. You don't have to actually see that happen. You can tell by the evidence that it's there. And so you can tell absolutely by the evidence of the outer solar system that a Planet X-like object had gone through there at some time and caused chaos, maybe at least once, maybe more than once.
What was the inspiration behind the title, The Son of the Son of Man? I'm sorry, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age.
The original point of the research was to find out what that sign of the Son of Man was. It was from Matthew 24:30. This is the sign that Jesus said would precede his second coming. Now, I deduced that probably if he was preceded by the Star of Bethlehem in his first coming, it may be the Star of Bethlehem, the sign of the Son of Man, may be the same stellar object that comes through regularly as sort of an orbital thing. And since the Magi were following the star, so called,
Right.
and the word for star is kokab in Hebrew, and it's astron, I think, in Greek, which can be used for both star or planet. It's any kind of a bright object, and so stars and planets are referred to as astrons by generically, and that it proceeded before them, behind the background stars having been stationary, but the star, so called, actually moved ahead of them separate from the background stars, indicating it was a solar system object. So it must have been a planet in our solar system or a comet that was close. And I deduced based on the evidence that it must have been a planet because a conjunction of planets only lasts a couple of days. At that, comets come and go relatively quickly, and they also are harbingers of disaster. Usually, a comet will last more than a week or two at the most, and the Magi's trip would have taken a couple of months at least. And of course, the supernova wouldn't work either.
Didn't Hale Bopp last more than a couple of weeks without we were able to see Hale Bopp?
It's possible. Some of the longer period comets just stick around for a while.
Oh, okay.
But they're coming from Persia, probably with a caravan, so it would have taken them a couple of months, probably, with plenty of stops, I imagine.
There are those people out there who believe that the Magi were actually astronomers.
They were what we call archaeoastronomers. They were actually primitive astronomers who believed in magic and mysticism, but they also had a form of science, and they had the Babylonian Magi, the equivalent that the prophet Daniel had worked with, actually had two different names for the planets. One, the mythological name, and one, the scientific name. And so Marduk was actually called, Planet X, as we understand it, was actually called Marduk. It's named after the chief god of the pantheon, Marduk. And Marduk was prominently displayed and prominently featured in their creation epic, the Babylonian creation epic, also known as Enuma Elish, where he fought against the dragon Tiamat, who represented the earth, and defeated Tiamat and set the earth in a new place close to the sun, and set her tail as the hammered bracelet in heaven. It's called the rakas, which literally means a hammered bracelet that is something made out of stone that is crushed and spread out in a circle in heaven. The firmament in the Bible, in Genesis, is a similar translation. It's called rakia, which is a cognate to the word rakas in Babylonian. And so scholars, after they found the Enuma Elish, confirmed that the biblical narrative was not only in line, it was in tune with the writings of his time, Babylonian creation epic being the most obvious example. More modern astronomers and fringe researchers realize a description of a hammered bracelet, a circle of rocks in heaven, is a perfect correlation of the asteroid belt. And since there was apparently a missing person, a missing planet in that region, and nothing but rubble left, that might be that Earth originally was formed there and it was moved by a cataclysm to its current position.
You mentioned a circle, and I was wondering if there's any connection between the circle that you mentioned and other circles, archaeological circles that have been found around the planet, including Stonehenge.
That's a good theory. I hadn't thought of that. The idea of a circle in heaven made of
Mhm.
stone might have been reproduced on Earth in circles of stone. That's a very good, very interesting insight. I never thought of that. And so we might, with Stonehenge and Rujum in northeastern Israel and other places, may have a memory of the asteroid belts written in stone on the Earth itself.
Could it also lead to the hypothesis that Stonehenge was actually created by extraterrestrials as a message to Earthlings um, pertaining to the planet X?
Maybe. The idea of a circle seems to be intrinsic to the universe itself
Yeah.
and the cycles. Really, the Stonehenge construction is really attuned, and all the ancient megalithic structures are all attuned to the universe, universal cycles, the rising of the sun and moon, the stars, how they travel. It's remarkable how precisely tuned they are. It's one of the reasons I like to study them in the mysterious world, because it lent insight on
Right.
the ancient mind and how it worked, so I could understand better how to write Planet X and understand the context it was, these people lived in, and the possibility they've been using Stonehenge and other monuments to also track the movements of Planet X.
Many people believe that Planet X is a doomsday myth. How do you respond to that?
The Planet X might be a myth. It's not really a doomsday. It's not really mentioned as a doomsday in any of the literature. The Enuma Elish, the other major, and really the only other major story that features an astral object causing cataclysms to the earth. That takes place at the creation of the earth, but it says nothing about the end times, at least not prominently. The
Hmm.
Bible is the one that takes it into the future and says the dragon will return in the future. The dragon is a common motif in ancient Near Eastern mythology. In basically every major one, the Mesopotamians, including the Sumerians, Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, and to some extent the Egyptians, where the Egyptian deity Ra, was constantly battling with the serpent Apophis to prevent it from devouring the earth. And Apophis was kind of a type of Tiamat. Also, the Canaanites worshipped a deity named Leviathan and believed, or Lotan in their language, and they believed that their god Baal defeated Lotan and created the earth also. And Leviathan shows up as a cognate to Lotan in the Bible. Similar situation, though the idea of God defeating Leviathan and creating the earth is kind of obscured. It's definitely there. And in my book, Planet X, the Sign of the Son of Man in the End of the Age, available at planet-x.info, you can actually, I have in chapter 6, I talk about Job and how it's incorrectly translated and incorrectly categorized as wisdom literature. It's actually the Hebrew creation epic, which maps very well against the Neme Elish to the point where they're basically carving the same source material. It's just a question of how it's handled. Enuma Elish handles it in a polytheistic way with many different gods battling each other, whereas Job is handled from a monotheistic perspective. There's only one God who has his helpers, the sons of God, which are also the planets. And Job and his friends having a discussion about ethics and whether or not God is just and so forth.
What exactly do you mean by the end of the age? Is this different from the end of time?
The end of the age is the kind of the most recent cycle. There's different cycles. For example, 2112 or 2012 was seen
Mhm.
as the end of the Mayan cycle, I think. Not much happened there, but they might have been pretty close if the end times happens soon. The Bible doesn't mention ages particularly. It's more about it kind of implies them at the ages of based on covenantal agreements between God and men. And these happen, for example, once at the Garden of Eden, after Noah's flood, the covenant with Abraham, the covenant with Moses, now the covenant with Jesus, which is kind of unspoken, but definitely there. He didn't break bread. He didn't break stone. He actually broke bread instead of stone. And so his was more practical. But every age was a covenant. We're in the Christian age now, which ended the Mosaic age, which was around 1350 BC probably. But every age was heralded by the division of a stone into two pieces, which I believe was actually harkening back to the division of the dragon into two pieces. In fact, when Abraham sacrificed a beast, some sort of beast to God, some sort of animal, he actually divided it into two pieces.
Mm.
And then God took this kind of fiery pot and passed it between the two pieces. I think he was actually symbolizing the destruction of the earth, of the dragon, by its division into two pieces by this fiery satellite that he used to divide it in half, just like Zechariah Sitchin speculated, which he believes is one of the satellites of Planet X, and I agree with him. So he'd actually used one of the satellites of Planet X to divide Earth into two pieces. The greater he used to form the moon, or the Earth, and the lesser to form the moon, asteroids, and comets.
So, what role does Jesus or the Son of Man play in the entire Planet X scenario?
By the time Jesus comes back, the world will be a total war scenario. And this he was predicting is because what appears to be happening is every time Jesus comes back, and he's been coming back every 2,000 years using Planet X as a sort of an observation post. And it's kind of his local throne to view the Earth and keep an eye on it, but stay
Mhm.
far enough away so it doesn't interfere. So every 2,000 years, Planet X, I think, has a 2,000-year orbit. He comes back again, surveys his work, and makes sure everything is going okay. He's been doing it every 2,000 years since mankind was created, or longer possibly. Actually, when any creation was created, because the plants that he created had to be given time to grow. So he came back 2,000 years later, see how they were doing. Then he put the animals down. 2,000 years of growth is about the right time for them to spread. And then humans. And then every once in a while they come back. He probably visited the Sumerians. There's evidence that sort of a primeval deity visited them, which they called this sort of a sun god character, but it might have been God as we understand it. And then 2,000 years after that, God came visibly to Abraham, visited him at the plains of Mamre, and spoke with him there visibly. 2,000 years after that, he came as Jesus. And then 2,000 years later, approximately, he'll return as Jesus Christ, returning to take his throne on earth. But when he comes back, the fallen angels and Satan will have traps set up for him to make that difficult to do. And that's what Armageddon and the end times are, is Satan trying to spoil Jesus' return and attempt to bring peace to the earth. Instead, he's met with war, and so there's a terrible battle, which is described in the book of Revelation.
Doug, you said that Jesus apparently or is believed to use Planet X as his observation deck. Is it possible then that Planet X is more than an observation deck, that Planet X is in fact heaven?
It is possible. In fact, I've considered the possibility that it is actually what is described in the Bible as heaven. There's actually three heavens in the scriptures mentioned. There's the first heaven, which is the earth's atmosphere, the sky.
Mhm.
The second heaven, I think it doesn't say specifically. One scripture says it's called the munitions of rocks, which is somewhere up in space, that between heaven on earth and heaven, the true heaven, the third heaven. I think it's probably the asteroid belt where the original cataclysm took place, where Earth used to orbit. And the
Mhm.
third heaven is Planet X itself, where God himself dwells in some form or fashion. Now, it's not sure if it's his heavenly throne or a throne that he uses when he goes to battle. There's talk in the Bible of a throned chariot that he rides into battle. That might be what Planet X is. Or it's more of like a Death Star thing, which follows after a space fleet of some kind, which in Isaiah says, the Lord shall come from a far country from the end of heaven with weapons of war so as to destroy the whole earth. That the word for far country describes a plot of land like that can be found on Earth itself, a physical place. And a large plot of land in space would be what we call a planet. So Isaiah actually backs up the possibility that the Lord is coming from another planet, literally, because that's the only way you could actually properly interpret what they've said there. That's right out of the scripture. And he also is bringing a war of weapons with him. He's not going to be flying, he's not going to be riding on a horse, because horses can't handle the space. And if they had wings and it could handle space, they would go very fast. You would have to have a space fleet, which engines that go quickly.
Mhm.
So probably it's like a Star Wars or Star Trek type fleet, which will clash with the fleet that they're building to oppose it here as we speak. And so that is probably what will happen. We'll have a good old fashioned space war, maybe not unlike Empire Strikes Back.
Doug, we've got
Except
to
the good
take
guys
our
are not the bad guys.
we have to take our break. Please stand by. Explanation. Our guest this hour is Doug Elwell. His website is planet-x.info. And you're watching the X Zone radio TV show right here on the X Zone TV channel, also on Tuber and other video platforms around the world, including Rumble, as a matter of fact. Listening? Well, you're listening to us on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X Home Broadcast Network, and your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, right here in St. Catharines, who stream us on classic1220.ca. Doug and I return after this break. Don't go away. And welcome back to everybody. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. If you'd like to send me an email, my email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. This hour, we're talking about Planet X. Fact, fiction, mystery, metaphor. What is Planet X? Well, to help answer that question and many more, Doug Elwell is my special guest. Doug is an author, he's a theologian, as well as a researcher, and what I consider to be one of the leading experts when it comes to Planet X. Visit him online at planet-x.info. Doug, has mainstream science ever acknowledged or denied the existence of Planet X?
No, in fact, mainstream science is actively searching for it as we speak. There are active searches going on by newer, younger scientists
Mhm.
who now call it Planet 9 because Planet X, which maps over to Planet 10 because of the Roman numeral X. They actually call it Planet 9 now because of Pluto was demoted as a planet. And so, because Uranus or Neptune is Planet 8, the next planet out becomes Planet 9. And so they also wanted to get away from the Planet X stigma, which is there's a lot of fancy stuff out there, fringy stuff, which
Mhm.
scientists don't want to be associated with. So what they do is that they call it Planet 9, but now it sounds like Planet 9 from outer space, so they're stuck with that. So this is neat. Planet 9 from outer space was an awful horror film. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So, but it's interesting because if true, it means that there are actually aliens coming from Planet 9 who were thrown down from heaven, what we call the fallen angels, and are responsible for some of the moral difficulties we're seeing now.
In order to pursue the religious aspect of Planet X and its place within the biblical times, as well as um, how modern day, how can I best say this? In order for one to believe that Planet X is part of biblical times, one has to believe in the Bible. How
Hmm.
do we deal with that in such a time as we're living in now where, you have to be so politically correct?
The pluralistic aspect of the culture, where religion is not necessarily considered to be mainstream thought anymore. That's why scientists take a position they do, is a neutral one, where they just look at the science, and that works out very well. That's necessary to get away from
Mhm,
theological reasonings. I mean, we thought the Earth was flat until well into the 19th century. A lot of people still believe that, even though I think it was Copernicus proved it wasn't. I think the 17th century or earlier. It really didn't catch on, grab hold until the 20th century, and even then, we still have flat Earth people trying to promote that idea, which is absurd. And so, uh, the idea it's hard to divorce it from Christianity because some of the evidence is in the Bible, and
mhm,
so and also Sitchin's work on Enuma Elish and the Sumerian texts seem to be married to the Bible because ancient Sumer isn't interesting to people except if they're interested in the world of the Bible, most for the most part. Some people just love the ancient world because it's interesting, including myself, but also from the biblical perspective. I like studying the ancient world because I understand the world of the Bible, and I find that these biblical passages are actually well founded in history. And we found all of the actual locations mentioned in the Bible. It's
mhm.
not a question of all these places existed, it's just a question of what time did this or that event happen, but everything else has been proven. And ancient Sumer made it even more interesting when they have Enuma Elish and the battle between God and the dragon, which mirrored uh, very well with some of the descriptions of the creation in the Old Testament and somewhat in the New, where the dragon returns. And so you have, and part of the reason I like to study the Old Testament and ancient Near East is you get an understanding of how they thought. And then, and like I did in the book, I talked about the Magi and ancient astronomy,
Mhm.
and you can understand the mindset of how they thought. And they're still bathed in mythology, and so the idea of God being associated with the planet and the Earth being associated with the dragon is not only acceptable; it's normative for them. So you have to understand how it's written in its context, and then communicate it in a way that modern folks can understand.
Do you think there's a deliberate suppression of Planet X information by the government or religious institutions?
Possibly, and certainly the government, because if Planet X does exist, and it's an existential threat, pardon the pun, to Earth,
Mhm,
then they would certainly want to cover that up because it could cause chaos. Even an asteroid coming and striking the Earth, a relatively small one, could cause panic, and so an entire planet surrounded by asteroids in its train before and after it, and also huge satellites and all kinds of other things going on, comets. The Book of Revelation took its start from the sixth seal onwards to the last bowl judgment. I would say many, if not most of them, are actually asteroids and comets striking the Earth, causing cataclysms,
mm,
because that's what Planet X carries with it in its orbital path. Ever since it intersected with Earth and struck it with one of its satellites, there were massive amounts of rocks and dust and gases and liquids and ice thrown up into space, which remains floating there to this day. We intersect it in our orbit all the time. That's where the meteor showers are. They're little bits of Earth that are returning back to Earth. And when Planet X comes back, bringing with it a huge amount of material that's still floating in front of it and back of it, because it captured a lot of Earth's mass in space. When it left, it brought a lot of its stuff with it. And that's probably how the comets formed too. It'll bring that back with it, and it'll have asteroids coming before and after it. And anything that gets in the way is going to get battered pretty badly. And so when they say in the Bible, the day of the Lord is at hand, woe to the Lord of those with, the cities and the judgments that are to come. They're talking about asteroids that must inevitably come with the return of Planet X and judge mankind by hitting you with huge asteroids. And that's really how ancient Sumer was taken out. Apparently, they were hit by a giant asteroid that struck in the marshlands in the southeastern Iraq near the Gulf there. The location is actually in the Gulf area. And it explains, and the Sumerians talk about this in their lamentation texts, over the fall of Sumer and of Ur, their capital city, that Enlil had appeared in the sky and hurled down a fiery spear, Enlil being one of their chief gods, struck Sumer and destroyed ancient Ur, the capital of Sumer, and wiped out much of southeastern Sumer. The asteroid crater matches the time of that destruction around 2000 BC. So it appears that Ur was actually taken out by a massive asteroid, possibly brought into our inner solar system by Planet X itself. And that's the ultimate judgment, to get hit by one of these asteroids. That was actually part of the ancient Earth from before the cataclysm that happened many tens of millions of years previous to that. It's poetic justice. I mean, these older wicked civilizations like Egypt and Sumer were referred to as the dragon, even in the Bible. And so when the dragon is struck and destroyed by an asteroid, it's kind of a lesser echo of the original titanic battle between God and the dragon. And so you see these patterns going over and over again in history and become clear again in the end times.
Is there any reference to Planet X in other religious books around the world, for example, in the Quran?
There might be. I haven't checked the Quran. There are references to it seems to be an Antichrist figure, Dajjal, but I don't know about Planet X per se. The Mormons have something they call Kolob, which they believe is actually a planet in space similar to Planet X theory. The Mormons also believe that each believer will have their own planet or satellite. And that's kind of interesting, because if the Planet X theory is correct, and as I deduced that the throne of a god in Revelation 4, I believe, is actually an appearance of Planet X. And it has 24 thrones for the elders, which is actually the patriarchs of Israel and the elders of, the apostles of the New Testament. And also these 7 fiery, lamps, and these 4, these could also be thrones for very powerful angels. And just like was promised to the Mormons.
Stand by. We've got to take our final break. Exxon Nation, Doug Elwell is my special guest, and we're talking to Doug about Planet X. When we come back, more about Planet X. We're going to tell you how you can get a copy of Planet X. We're also going to tell you about the other books that Doug has written over the years. And this is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, Tuber, and on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ, right here in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, streaming us at classic1220.ca. And welcome back. This is the final segment of this edition of the X Zone radio TV show. Doug Elwell is my guest, and he's a theologian, researcher, and author of Planet X, the sign of the Son of Man, and the End of Time. Visit his website at planet-x.info. Doug, what are people, or what can people of faith take away from your work? Is this a call to fear or to prepare spiritually?
I think prepare. Fear, there's always been a fear of the end times and of the unknown in general. Talking about Planet X actually brings light to the situation and gives you an understanding of what's actually going to happen, so you can better prepare for it. And if they had no idea what the sign of the Son of Man was, then how could you prepare for it? Will it come close to the earth? Will it stay far away? Will it bathe us in X-rays? Will it send us fiery doom down upon us? If you know what's going to happen, which I've talked about at length in the 7th chapter, last chapter of Planet X, the sign of the Son of Man and the end of the age, is that you basically if you hide underground, in an underground bunker during the worst of it, you could survive. People on the surface, and this even says this in the book of Revelation, are going to be subjected to intense heat because what will happen? What Planet X has is it has a lot of water ice left in its orbit from the original cataclysm with Earth when much of the mantle was thrown into the space. Most of the water in Earth's composition is actually found in the mantle. It's actually chemically bonded with water-bearing minerals, known as olivines and pyroxenes. And when these olivines and pyroxenes are compressed, like being hit by an asteroid, for example, they release the water. And it's probably what happened during the time of the flood, for example, when they said there was fountains of the deep. If an asteroid probably hit the Earth around that time, maybe many asteroids, it compressed the mantle and forced water out of the rocks, which then jetted up into space out of cracks in the crust, and then flooded the Earth. And much of that might have actually gone into space, actually. This happened at the time of the cataclysm where the Earth was created, as described in Enuma Elish, when the satellites of Planet X struck Earth. That would have been a much heavier impactor. In fact, it would have totally just melted the entire Earth. It would have been solid lava through and through, surface to core. And as a result of that, a gigantic amount of water would have come out of the Earth. And that would have formed the initial hydrosphere, which is basically the atmosphere, Earth's oceans, rivers, and lakes, and everything. All the water prior to that was locked chemically into the mantle, and the Earth was probably dry as a bone on the surface. After that, it had giant amounts of water and a huge basin carved out by the impactor where the moon used to be, probably the Pacific Ocean basin. And that had now a huge amount of seas covering the Earth and a hydrological cycle with rain and lakes and rivers and everything you need for life to be supported, all happening because of the one seminal event of that, striking the Earth by this satellite.
Doug, what do you believe will happen when Planet X returns? Catastrophe, transformation, or revelation?
All three, actually. There'll be revelation that they've been talking about a planet all this time. We didn't even know it. And as Daniel says in the last chapter of Daniel, chapter 12, men will run to and fro across the earth, and knowledge will be greatly increased. I preach to people as part of my kind of lay ministry I have going. I try to enlighten people about modern science is not our enemy. Astronomy and things like that are proof of that. Archaeology, geology, all prove that the Bible is true. It's not our enemy. Good science that's not agenda driven will provide the answer to you. All you have to do is believe science and match it up with scripture, and it all makes sense. And that's what a lot of the Planet X book is, matching up the modern science with the scripture and reinterpreting according to science rather than speculation that people lived 500 years ago.
If the Bible is true, Doug, how come it's not the only religious book out there? Because, it says in the Bible, it says God created man. And in Genesis, it goes through the entire creation. Why then would there be different religious philosophical books out there if, in fact, the Bible is true, the events are true, God is real, and why are there so many different religions?
So different spirits out there with different ideas than God, which have different agendas, and that's always been true since even before the world was created. I've come to the theory that the universe was created as a result of the rebellion in heaven, where when Satan fell, he imagined a universe of his own, a world of his own, where he would be God. And as a result of that, there was an imbalance of spiritual energy in heaven, which led to an explosion which formed the universe as we understand it. So we might be actually living inside of Satan's mad dream of conquest and control of a universe of his own. And since that time, all the fallen angels have been working with him to create an alternative reality different than what God wants. But also, the loyal angels are also trapped in this reality too. And so God has authority over them and is working with them. And those two ways of thinking have been competing with each other the entire time.
Doug, if once again, I'm using this hypothetical so I can walk the middle of the line here. If God is real, why doesn't he just get rid of all the negativity? Why doesn't he just get rid of Satan? Why doesn't he just get rid of the fallen angels? Why doesn't he just make it a better place on this planet where we can all live? Get rid of the famines, get rid of the hunger, get rid of the dissension, get rid of the wars. Why is
That's
he
a great
letting this
question.
happen?
That's a great question, and the answer is he is doing that. It's taking a long time
Why so
because
long?
Satan's a very powerful being, and he's using his power. And this is part of the idea that Satan is, in a way, kind of a co-creator of the universe.
Hmm.
Is that his great power he can use to slow down God's efforts to control him. As a sort of a master of time and space, what he does is he delays God and he opposes him. And in that space is what we call time and space. Time space is what the universe is. We're living in the period of delay in which Satan is preventing God from doing exactly what you and I want, which is to fix those problems and create a paradise. I tell you, you're exactly on target, but you just need more patience. God will come back and fix it. He's been doing it incrementally for a long time now. The ages I talked about with Abraham and Moses and so forth was one more stake in the coffin of Satan. And the
Right.
last one, the last ones will be coming up soon, and there'll be one more after the millennium, and then Satan will be defeated for good, and justice and righteousness and peace will rule the universe.
Doug, we're coming down very fast to the end of the show. My final question for you is, what's your message to those who may be skeptical but curious? Where should they start? I mean, of course, going to your website at planet-x.info
Right?
and buying your book.
Well, I can mention my book real quick, but I would say the Bible first of all, starting with the New
Mhm.
Testament. That's where I went. It'll give you a very good start and understanding of a religion that is both high standards but also peace loving and love oriented. It's a good combination of factors which will give you a good baseline and understanding of how religion works. I also do a great deal of writing on the creation and the end times in my book, Planet X, the Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, available at planet-x.info. There's also some free material about ancient mysteries written from a Christian perspective at mysteriousworld.com. You can also search online for some of my books at amazon.com. Type in Doug Elwell, The Riddle of the Sphinx. Doug Elwell will help narrow that search because there's a few books like that. And also Doug Elwell, Mysterious Word Ireland, which talks about ancient Ireland. And there's a lot of interesting mythology and religion in there, and history of Christianity too, for those interested in such things. And those are the other two books I've written recently. And I have more books coming. Eventually, I'll write a book on the giants and explain my theory about what I alluded to about the creation of the universe is sort of Satan's mad quest for glory, and how the giants were created to help him achieve that goal. And so that's what I'm working on now.
Doug, as always, time goes by so fast whenever you're with us here in the X Zone. Thank you so much for joining us. Continued success. And as always, I look forward to the next time you join us to carry on this conversation and try to put the pieces of this great mystery that we call life together. Thanks very much for joining us, Doug.
Great conversation. Thanks again, Rob.
Take care, my friend. Exonation. Now, that was Doug Elwell, author of Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man, and The End of the Age. You can learn more about Doug at his website by visiting planet-x info. Now, whether you believe Planet X is science fiction, ancient truth, or cosmic harbinger, one thing is for certain. We're living in an age where old mysteries are becoming new realities. Until next time, keep your minds open, your hearts grounded, and remember the truth is often stranger than fiction. For the X Zone Radio TV show, for the X Zone Broadcast Network, and of course our affiliates, the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, Tuber, and your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, right here in St. Catharines, who stream us at classic1220.ca. Always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.